What are the significances of wearing kippah, talis, tzitzit, and tefillin?
Okay. Uh, the kippah, or the yarmulke, is a head covering. And there's nowhere in the Torah that you will see it commanded. Okay? It's a custom. It's a widespread custom. And in some cases, customs carry the same force as a commandment. And this is probably one of those cases. So there are a lot of Jewish people who feel that they must have their head covered when they come into a synagogue. There are a lot of synagogues that require men, and in some cases women, to cover their heads when they enter a synagogue. And it's a powerful custom, but it is a custom. And the best that I can tell is the custom comes from showing reverence to God. Our ancestors showed that there was a higher power by wearing something on their heads. And so we maintain that today through the ritual of the kippah or the yarmulke. The talit is commanded. There's a commandment to wear fringes on the corners of your clothes. That comes toward the end of the book of Numbers. And so the talit is a prayer shawl that's worn by adult Jews in morning prayer. There are different customs. There are some movements in Judaism that say really it's only for men and not for women. There are some movements in Judaism that say really it's for married men, and single men are not encouraged to wear a talit except under certain circumstances. And at the corner of a talit, at the corner of the prayer shawl, are some specially tied and knotted strings. And these strings are called the tzitzit, the fringes. And we say a blessing, because it is commanded, we say a blessing over wrapping ourselves in the tzitzit. And then a big prayer shawl would be worn at services. There are other Jews who, in addition to wearing a prayer shawl at services, will wear a smaller prayer shawl under their shirt, and depending on their custom, they will let the tzitzit hang out like right above their waistline, and you'll see them sort of hang right near their pants pockets. And this is the same idea, but just taken day long, that we want to be reminded of the commandments. If we're reminded of the commandments, we're going to behave in a better way. And so being able to see the tzitzit, being able to show others the tzitzit, it's a way of reminding oneself of the commandments. And talit, tefillin, and kippah, talit, yeah. And what was the last one?
Tefillin, tzitzit.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So that smaller talit is often called the tzitzit. Those are sort of used interchangeably. The last one is tefillin. So tefillin are these sort of odd-looking leather straps attached to leather boxes. And in the leather boxes are specially written excerpts of the Torah that are written with special ink on a special parchment, then rolled up and put in the boxes. And the idea is that there's a commandment in Deuteronomy that says you shall take the words of the Torah and put them between your eyes and on your hand, and they shall be on your heart. And so we do our best to take this literally. So there's one set of the tefillin that goes sort of across the forehead with the box right there, almost between your eyes, with those biblical verses. Then there's another that you wrap on your arm. The leather strap goes 7 times between your wrist and your elbow. And the box goes inside your arm, and it can touch your chest, and therefore it's very close to your heart. So when we do this, and there are many Jews who do this every weekday morning, but they don't do it on the Sabbath. When you do this, it's our best attempt to take this commandment from Deuteronomy and express it literally.
What is the Jewish concept of afterlife? The afterlife in the Greek and Roman, Egyptian religions was very important, and in Christianity and Islam it's important, but we don't really hear about it much in Judaism, so what is it?
It would be a much easier question to answer if someone had come back to report to us. But unfortunately, nobody has done that yet. So we're left to speculate. And all theology and all philosophy about the afterlife, we have to acknowledge, is basically speculation. Judaism doesn't like to speculate too much on it. And I think the reason is that the commandments are given to live by and not to die by. We don't want to be a religious tradition that is so focused on the next world that we somehow forget to take care of ourselves and our families and our communities in this world. So there are terms that you'll see in some of the texts, Sheol is a biblical term for, maybe it's for the afterlife, maybe it's for like the netherworld. That might be a better way to translate it. Then the Talmud introduces this term of olam haba, which literally translated means the world to come, and it's probably closer to a traditional view of heaven than Sheol is. But the Talmud doesn't tell us what to expect there. It's a place you want to go, but it doesn't tell us what to expect there. It doesn't tell us what it looks like, and interestingly, it doesn't even really tell us how to get there. It's implicit that getting to Olam Haba is just by living by all the other things that we've read about in the Torah and all the other commandments. And so you're right that Judaism really doesn't elaborate on it, but we certainly have these concepts of afterlife, and they do bring a lot of comfort to a lot of people.
How are we doing on time?
Doing great.
Okay. So, what's the Jewish interpretation of the Messiah and the end of the world?
Right. Judaism doesn't spend much time talking about the end of the world. We work to make the world a better place. Obviously, in that process, there are some accomplishments and there are some setbacks. We worry for the future, especially the future of the state of Israel and the future of the Jewish people. But even amid all this worry, we don't usually talk about the end of the world. That doesn't enter our vocabulary very often. The idea of Messiah does enter our vocabulary more often because it's a source of disagreement. There are some Jews that think that the Messiah is going to come and redeem the world and make it a better place at a certain time that God will choose. And then there are other Jews that say, we can't rely on that particular occurrence. So we're going to work to create a messianic age, a time that will be better because we've brought it upon ourselves. But what we do agree on is that the Messiah hasn't come yet. And that's a fundamental theological disagreement with other religions. But the Messiah hasn't come, and we're looking forward to that time, whether it's with a specific individual or a more generalized messianic era. We're looking forward to that time when our belief in Messiah and our hope for a better future will be realized.
So you mentioned Israel before.
Mm-hmm.
Why is Israel the holy land of the Jews, and specifically why is Jerusalem the holy city of the Jews?
Israel is the Holy Land because as early as Abraham, God promised the land of Israel, which was called at that time the land of Canaan, to Abraham's descendants. And our ancestors experienced God there more than anywhere else. The prophets prophesied there. The temple was built there. Our ancestors fought battles to protect that land and became settled there. So and so much of our history is there. So it's holy both because the Bible says it's holy, and because our history and our destiny was so enriched there. The reason Jerusalem is the capital is because David made it the capital in about 1000 BCE. So, and the reason he chose it is very similar to the reason that Washington, D.C. is the capital of the United States. He chose it because it was in the middle, and it didn't belong in the territory of any tribe at that time, so that every tribe would have equal access to Jerusalem. So he actually began his reign in the city of Hebron, but he understood the advantages to Jerusalem, both the political and the geographical advantages, and he moved the capital to Jerusalem. And there he also picked the site of the temple. He wasn't merited to build the temple, it was his son Solomon. But then our affection for Jerusalem and our commitment to Jerusalem was reinforced by the fact that the temple was built there, and that still remains the holiest site. The western wall is part of the retaining wall of the temple, and that's another part of what gives it special significance and holiness. And the modern state of Israel chose to make Jerusalem its capital, knowing all of this history. In 1948, basically all of the institutions of the early state were in Tel Aviv. But they understood that in building a modern state, they were also building upon the shoulders of those who had come before them, who had made Jerusalem the capital. So it took a lot of effort, but they, over the course of the first few years of statehood, move the institutions of the state, almost all of them, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, including the president's official residence, the prime minister's official residence, and the Knesset building.
So, what's your current outlook on the prospects of peace in the region for Israel with its neighbors?
Well, I try and be an optimist. We're filming this only about 2 weeks after 8 days of heartbreaking violence took place in the Gaza Strip and in the part of Israel that's not far from the Gaza Strip. My hope is that both sides will look at the devastation of this violence and want to return to negotiations. It's not that simple, in large part because there are extremists on both sides that don't want to acknowledge the other, and in part because you want to negotiate with someone you trust, but you really only learn to trust someone through negotiation. And right now there's very little trust between the two sides. But I'm hopeful that they'll look at the violence that just occurred and want something better for not only for their own children but for the children on the other side. I'm hopeful that they will see that neither side is going away, and if your enemy isn't going away, then the next best thing is to sit down and work out a peace so that everyone can live peacefully. The news changes every week and sometimes every day. Sometimes it makes me more optimistic and sometimes less optimistic. But I do hope that the two sides can work it out through negotiation.
Would you be okay if Jerusalem was split into Jewish Israeli West Jerusalem and Palestinian East Jerusalem as the capital of both nations?
It would be heartbreaking, but because I believe that Jerusalem, in a perfect world, should be a unified city. But the truth is Jerusalem was divided for 19 years, from 1948 to 1967, and the demographic changes that took place in those 19 years still affect all the negotiations and all the plans for Jerusalem today. I would want to make sure that the holy sites are available and accessible to all people of every faith. And it would make me sad if Jerusalem were divided, but to me, if everything else were negotiated and we were sure that this would bring peace, it's something that would make me sad, but that I would consider an appropriate sacrifice for bringing peace to all the people of that region.
Thank you, Rabbi, for this interview.
Thanks, Ben. I appreciate it.